Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining me this afternoon. My name's John, and I'm going to be taking you through the attendance module within SchoolPod, and that will include some of the reporting elements as well. So the first thing you will notice is in the top left corner up here, it does say BehaviourWatch. Now that will vary depending on the product that you have purchased. It might in fact say SchoolPod up in that top left corner instead. So the first thing that I'm going to take you through this afternoon is how to take attendance within the system. So there are two different ways that you're able to do that. The first one is through the dashboard app, just called Attendance, which you can configure on your own dashboard if needed. And the other way is through the Attendance tab. Now, depending on how many kind of custom tabs we've built for you, you might find that the attendance tab is on the second or third or fourth page. So that's why we have the dashboard app available to you as well, just to help you get to that attendance module ever so slightly quicker. Either way, whether you click on the tab itself or to take attendance down here, you will be taken to the attendance taking screen. Now this screen is pretty straightforward really. So on the left hand side you will have a series of drop downs available to you. These consist of your class, form or provision drop down, and we'll take a look at what each of those mean in terms of the system in a moment's time. They also consist of the period drop down, the staff drop down, a date selector, and then just a number of keys to help navigate the home attendance module. So the first thing you can see is to select the class, form or provision for which you would like to take attendance. So within here you'll have a list of classes or forms, so classes being your timetable teaching classes, forms being your tutor groups, and then if you are scheduled as a member of staff who is looking after a provision or an intervention as you might know them, you can also find those within your list as well. So you can see here, because I am the class teacher for 11A, it's popped 11A right at the very top of that list for me to save me having to navigate through multiple different classes. So if I were to select 11A, what that's going to do is going to pull up period 4's attendance for me by default, because that is the period we are currently in according to the current time. But I can change that to any other period of the day if I need to fill something in retrospectively. You will also find a staff drop down, and that will just default to your own name as the user who is logged in. The date selector is pretty self-explanatory. That just allows you to select the date for which you want to take attendance, and selecting that will bring up a calendar option for you. You can see here we've got a list of all of the different pupils who are in our class, this class being 11A, and then we have a few columns for which to take attendance through. So the first three columns are for marking pupils as present, indicated in green, absent, indicated in red, and then late, indicated in yellow. The other columns, you will not be filling in information directly within those columns, but rather can review information that has been added throughout the week and on individual days through those columns instead, basically. You also have, before we look at the actual taking of attendance, some other icons that display a little bit of information for you. So if a pupil is scheduled with a detention for the date that you've selected, you will get this little padlock symbol to let you know that that pupil is scheduled for a detention today, and if you hover over it, it will allow you to see when they are scheduled for that detention and where and for how long. Next to that, you have a kind of a sky blue icon, and that is just to let you know that that pupil is on report. Towards the bottom as well, you do have the option to show SEN status, and if you select that, it will basically refresh your attendance screen and then highlight in a deeper shade of blue any pupils who have got an SEN status attributed to them, and once again, hovering over that will show you what their SEN status is. What you can do is you can also see down here, you've got a list of students not attending your class. Now, if I was to select period 2 from this list, that's going to change to a provision instead for me, because I am a member of staff according to the system who is responsible for looking after students on the education support provision. In this case, it's just Holly. If I was to select this back to 11A, however, what it will do is it will bring up 11A's class list for me, except it will not include Holly in that list. And at the bottom, it will tell me that I have got one student who is not attending my class. If I select that, it will pull up Holly's name to let me know that she will be in education support panel, so I can make the necessary selection from the class form provision drop down as needed. So that's kind of an overview of the information that is contained within the attendance screen. Now let's take a look at how to actually take attendance. So the first thing you can see is these radio buttons here, and then just a small text box underneath the late column. If I were to select this radio button under the present column, that will take me to the attendance code selector basically, and that will contain a list of all of the DFE specified codes available to you for marking attendance. Now by default, that will bring up the present mark for the morning or afternoon, depending on whether you have selected an AM or PM registration period, but you can select that to any other code as needed. You can enter in any attendance comments you need to, so if somebody is not well or they've just not turned up, then you can specify those within there. And then you have a few options below. So you can either click Save and Next to save the first pupil's attendance, and you'll see here it saved our attendance for David and taken us straight down to Ben. Or you can click Save. That will just save Ben's attendance and then take you out of the attendance taking in case you need to go away and do something else urgently. The other option was, of course, to be able to cancel taking that attendance. The other option is to select Absent. Now, when I select Absent, you'll see that it automatically pops in an end code for me for period 2. Okay. Now you'll notice we can't see that end code here. That's because we're not looking at the PM registration period. This is a lesson period. Okay, so these two columns will only show you the AM and PM registration, and these columns will show you AM, PM, and all of the lessons in between. Now, the reason that changed to an end code by default is because we have set that up on the back end of the system to always mark absence from home attendance as end codes, no reason yet provided, because that is basically telling the system that it's not for the individual class teachers to indicate why that pupil is not there. That would be for an attendance officer or somebody else to chase up that absence. We can switch that off, however, if that is an option that doesn't appeal to you, and we can have it set up so that the individual class teachers can specify the exact reason for absence if needed, but it can still default to N in case they don't. The other option is to mark somebody as late. Now this is ever so slightly different because when you select into that column, it's going to ask you what time the pupil arrived. It's then going to work out how many minutes late that equates to, and then provide you with the space to enter a comment. So if I was to say that our pupil arrived at 3 minutes past 3 and click out of that box, it's going to change that to them being 303 minutes late. So in this case, very late indeed. So what I can do is I can change that to 10 minutes late. And when I click out of that box, that will go to 10 minutes after the time of arrival, the start time of that period. So it does work both ways. And again, once you're happy with the information you've input, you can click Continue, and that's then going to be stored on the system, and you can see a nice quick at-a-glance view of how many minutes late that pupil was. The other options you do have available are to click on the overall column headers themselves. So if I was to click Select All, that's going to allow me to mark everybody in one go with a certain attendance code. And you can see here I have the option to overwrite existing attendance codes or not. So if I leave that blank and click Save, that's going to mark everybody as present, apart from those pupils who we've already marked as absent. Now, you can mark everybody as present right at the start and then go back in and afterwards change those 1 or 2 absence or late, depending on how many there are. But it does give you that flexibility as to whether you want to overwrite everything or just those that don't have marks at all at the moment. And that's really as simple as it is for taking attendance. It's simply a case of pulling up the class and the period for whom you want to take attendance, and then working your way down this list, either clicking the individual buttons as present and absent or late, or selecting an entire column at once and then going back and changing the outliers if that's the way you prefer to work. The only other thing to note on this page really is in the bottom right hand corner, you do have the option to print a template. So if you know you're having to go off site or you need a hard copy of that register, you can click Print Template. It will basically produce a printout containing the list of pupils you have selected so that you can take that with you, say on a school trip or somewhere where you won't have access to the system directly. There is one more thing I will show you. If we go to an AM registration period, That's going to refresh the attendance for us, but what it's also going to pull up is a dinner option column. So if you are using school money with us, for example, and you do have the two products linked together, you can pull up a list of the dinner choices that your pupils have got selected in SchoolPod, and then you can make changes to them here as well. So if for this particular morning a pupil who would normally be sandwiches is now having a paid meal, you can change that, and then when that register is submitted, that will update school money accordingly. So now we are going to move on to kind of monitoring that attendance and just making sure that things are being filled in on a daily basis. So the way we do that is we go to the monitor area, which is the clock icon at the top of the page. And once we're within there, you have a couple of tabs that are of interest to us. So we've got the attendance monitoring tab and the registrations not taken tab. So we're going to start off with attendance monitoring. So if I click into here, by default, this will load up for me a list of any pupils who, for the current day, for AM and PM registration periods only, are not authorised absent for the day. So you can see here we have 4 pupils who fall into that category. Using the drop downs along the top, you are able to specify a wider range of data. So you can say, I'm only interested in looking at pupils who are N codes or O codes, for example, and the list will change accordingly. You can also do a list of everybody who is just generally absent. You can also change what period you want to look at, so whether that's AM and PM, just AM, just PM, or all of your periods down to the individual lesson periods as well. And whether or not you want to look at a particular day's attendance or a range of days' attendance. Again, depending on your selections, the list that you receive will be longer or shorter. Below here, what you can see is that we've got a list of 4 pupils who are currently not authorised absent. So we can amend that directly from attendance monitoring. So let's say, for example, that we want to follow up on Fran and why Fran hasn't turned up this morning. What we can do is we can first of all send a text message out to the priority 1 contact of all of these pupils to request from that priority contact a reason for their pupil's absence. So the way we do that is we click send text message in the bottom right hand corner, and that's going to bring up the default template. What that will do is pull the name of the child. It's going to say they were absent from school in the period of absence and the date of absence. It's a very basic message, the default message. What you can do though is under the admin area, if I just cancel out of this at the moment. Now, not all of you will have access to the admin area, but any person at your school who is an admin user can set these up fairly easily. So you would come to admin, you would scroll down just a little way, and then once we're there, we have SMS templates. That's under the automatic reports / communications section, which is normally about a third to a halfway down the admin page. And within here, you can set up your own absence templates for use within attendance monitoring. Now, bear in mind that any text messages that are sent out from the system do come at a cost of 4p per text. So it's not mandatory to use them, but if you do use them, there is a cost that will be involved. Either way, whether you've used the send text messages or not used the send text messages, once you have received subsequent information from the parent of that child or the carer of that child as to why that absence is being recorded for the day, you can then come back to attendance monitoring, click on the authorised absence. You can specify the new code that you need to pop in, so it might be that they're going to be ill today. We can authorise the entire day for that illness, so if in the morning you find that information out and know they're not going to be in the afternoon, you don't have to do it twice. And you can say, Fran is unwell today. Click save, and that's going to automatically update that for you in the list. Fran has now disappeared because she is no longer a not authorised absent pupil. She would now appear under the illness list or under the authorised absence list, and you can just carry on with the other pupils. What you can also do within here is authorise attendance in advance as well. So let's say you get a phone call from a parent and they say, we're taking our child on holiday, we're going to be away for 2 weeks from this date range. You can click date range, you can click next, you can specify the pupil for whom the absence is going to be recorded, the start and end date of that absence, and then the absence reason. Click save. And again, that's been input in advance, and when class teachers go back to home attendance to take their attendance for the day, if they pull up a date where you've already popped in that holiday in advance, that will be reflected in home attendance. And as we saw earlier, if they are marking everybody as present, it won't override that unless they specify it to do so. And you do have a few other options along the bottom available to you. These are largely for emailing staff to let them know of any absences. View reports we'll look at in more detail very shortly. You can go to consequences, and that will allow you to fill in a behaviour slip. So if there is a consequence that needs to be filled in as a part of that absence, you can absolutely do that. And then the ability to export or print this list view as required. Okay. If you've got any questions about any of these screens, the vast majority of them do have a little help button in the top right hand corner. If you click that, that will bring up just a little bit of guidance about that area, just as more of a refresher than anything. But of course, if you do have any questions about attendance monitoring or anything we look at today, please do feel free to get in touch with your support contact after this session, and they'll be more than happy to give you more of a kind of a one-to-one session if you need it. So if we close that. The next thing we'll look at then is registrations not taken. So using this, you will be able to identify where a register, basically, as it says, hasn't been taken and who hasn't taken that register. So what we can do is specify the kind of information range that we want to include. So we're looking at just today's date, and we're going to include all staff members and all periods within that, although we can just narrow that down to the morning register if we want to. So if I click Generate Report, this is going to pull up a list of all of the staff members and registers that have not been taken for the current morning. So you can see here, most people haven't taken a full register for the morning. So what you can do is you can select all of these that you want to email reminders to. And when you click Email Reminder, that will send out an email to the teacher that you have specified here to let them know that there is a register that they haven't taken yet that needs to be taken. You can also print a hard copy of that list if you do want to have something to kind of take to them, something a bit more physical. And you can click Take Attendance if you want to. Once you've got one of these selected and click Take Attendance, it will take you to home attendance to take the register for that class, basically. You'll notice here that not every single class has a teacher assigned to it. That's because under admin and roles, that class basically hasn't been assigned a form tutor yet. So the way you would do that, again, if you are an admin user, is under admin. If we come back to the main admin screen and scroll right to the very top, there is a button called Roles on the second row. Within here, you can set up your form tutors and basically select them from a list. So you can see here we've got a lot of not sets for 10B. That's as easy as choosing who you want to set your form tutor for form B as, and then clicking Save. Okay. And that's really all there is to registrations not taken. It's a very simple report, but it just allows you to see who's not taking their attendance and when that attendance is not being taken. The next thing we're going to start looking at then is just some of the actual reports that you're able to get once you've started inputting your attendance data. Now, the way we do that is we come to the reports area, which is the little bar chart symbol at the top of the page. And that will allow us to select the attendance tab. And within the attendance tab is a whole list of different reports that you have available to you for analysing your attendance data. Now, don't worry, we're not going to go through them all today. I'm going to take you through a few of the more useful reports, and then feel free to have a play around with some of these reports afterwards. If you get into a bit of a muddle with your filters, just press F5 on the keyboard or refresh the page using the spiral arrow at the top, and that'll just take you back to your dashboard and basically allow you to start again. And of course, if there is a report that you're interested in finding that we don't cover in today's session, once again, just get in contact with your designated support person and they will be able to give you a bit more of a guided tour of that specific report. So, the first report I'm going to show you is school-wide attendance, which is this report here. So if we click into this, this is basically going to allow you to specify a year group or a form group on the system, or a house on the system if you have houses set up, or a class as well if you have teaching classes or a timetable set up. For now, we're just going to select 11A again, and we're going to say we're looking at on-roll pupils, all pupils regardless of whether they are or are not ever 6. We're looking at the whole range of attendance percentage. This is their total attendance, and we're looking at that for the current term. So we're going to change that to summer half term 1, and we're going to click Go. Now that might take a minute or two to load up, probably not that long, depending on how much data you've actually got. So you can see here it's pulled up all 27 pupils we have within 11A, and it's basically given us a column for every single day, AM and PM, of every week for the first half term of the summer term. And it's going to basically display for us all of the attendance codes that we've given. Okay. And if we scroll on to the right, you'll see that encompasses that whole half term. Now, depending on the access that you've given, you are able to edit attendance directly through the reports themselves, but that is a limitation that you can pop on in terms of who you want to be able to do that. To change attendance information via the report, it's pretty easy. So you just click on the day that you want to change attendance for and on the row for the pupil whose attendance you want to change. And it will pull up a list of all of the periods that you could possibly change the attendance for, and you can just select what you want to change their attendance to, as we did really in home attendance. What you can also do though in this report that is pretty useful is if you set yourself up with a class called whole school, you can then pull up a list of all of your pupils in one go, scroll right down to the very bottom of the report, and you'll see a button here that is marked with an asterisk. If I were to select that, this could allow me, for example, to pop in where my holiday days are. So I can say, where is it? For example, that there are untimetable sessions on that day, just for the morning or for both. Click save. That will work for just a couple of seconds. And then once this report reloads, you should see that that entire column is now populated with X codes for us. Okay. And again, it's just a nice, easy way of blocking in any kind of whole school absence if you need to. You do also get a few other options of information within here. So it's going to allow you to see not only the pupil's name and their class, but what house they're in, what year group, what their overall year attendance is, and what their current attendance is according to the half term that we're looking at. And then along the bottom, you do get a key for that as well. Now, one thing we will go through whilst we're in this report is the ability to filter the information you're seeing. So if we click on filter in the bottom left-hand corner, this will take us to the filter screen. Now, this is pretty much the same on all of the reports that we're going to look at today. The only thing you might find that's slightly different is that some of the drop-downs will be grayed out because they're not particularly useful with the report that we're looking at. But with the school-wide attendance, you can do things like narrow down to look at a single pupil, or look at whether you want to include your free school meals or not free school meals pupils, or any custom categories that you have set up. And again, using these filters, you can just narrow down the results that you're looking at. So with school-wide attendance, what you can also do is you can export this report, and that will export it to an Excel spreadsheet for you. And you do also have some extra bits of information in the top right here. So this is just your overall count of kind of present attendance, absent marks, and then the same information, but only for the selection you've made. So in this case, 11A. And you can see here that the whole school attendance is 91.44%, but 11A's attendance is 79.38%. So slightly lower than that average school attendance. Okay. So if that report all makes sense, what I'm going to do is take us to a couple of the other reports that are also pretty useful to use. So if we go back, the first one we'll come to is authorization breakdown by student. So within here, it's fairly similar actually to the school-wide attendance report, except instead of looking at individual days of information, it's more of a general overview. So you'll see at the top here, we can specify whether we want to look at a single student or a selection of students. Same thing with classes. If you've got multiple timetables set up, which timetable you want to look at, and then what period you want to include in terms of the data that we're looking at. And you can see here, based on the period selection we're looking at, that the percentages might be slightly different. You've also got the date range that you want to look through. And you can see here, we're looking at this academic year. So again, the previous report was only looking at the summer half term one, which is again why the figures look ever so slightly different. And then you can include a show detailed breakdown if you want to. What that does is if we take a quick look down here at the actual data itself, is in addition to all of the contextual columns of information, we have a column for the overall count and percentage attended for that pupil, and then the same information for their authorized absences, unauthorized absences, and then approved educational activity, and then just a column for possible attendances. So what show detail breakdown will allow us to do is if we select it and click go, is that will actually include a number of other columns for us, and that will be for the individual attendance codes themselves. So we can see, for example, for pupils, what their overall counter percentage of illness codes is, if that's something we were interested in seeing through this report. What you also have is the ability, if we just switch this off, to look at just pupils within a certain range of percentage attendance. So we can say, I'm only interested in seeing any pupils who have between 0 and 95% attendance. And when I click go on that, you'll see the figure drops from 282 pupils to just 51 pupils with less or equal than 95% attendance. Now you can do that the other way around as well. You can say, I'm only interested in looking at our pupils who have perfect attendance, and produce a list of those pupils as well. And you can see here for the attendance we've actually taken, there are 226 pupils who have 100% attendance. So you can also here quickly narrow down